Now it's time for some New York Mets baseball talk. Here's Gary Mack bringing you the latest news and analysis from Mets Nation and the world of baseball on another edition of Mets Musings.
And hello and welcome to another edition of Mets Musings. It's episode number 261, and it's great to be back with you. Had a little bit of a delay here between episodes, but wanted to get a show in before the big playoffs. Yes, the Mets are in the playoffs. They're in the one-card playoff, and we'll see how long they can hang in there. Hopefully they get by the San Francisco Giants and move on to face the Chicago Cubs. But we are going to go through all of that, including hopefully some Tim Tebow stuff, some maybe even some retirement talk, folks that just retired this past week, and a little bit on some sad news that's happened in the world of baseball, and a very tough week, last week and a half, I guess you might say, for the Miami Marlins, as well as for the New York Mets, and I'm sure the Washington Nationals. But before we get to all of that stuff in the really big show, I want to bring in my special co-host for this evening, and it's my old co-host and co-creator of Mets Musings. Barry's back. Barry, welcome back.
Thank you, Gary. It's great to be back and to talk about postseason Mets baseball for the second consecutive year.
And that's something that I guess, a mere 6 weeks ago we would have thought would have been a pipe dream. This team was not doing well. Didn't look like they were going to make a run. Didn't think that was at all possible. And here they come out of nowhere, and all of a sudden, from 5.5 out of the second wild card, they win the first wild card spot. Amazing.
Sure is, Gary. On August 4th, which was 2 months ago and the last time I called in, at that time, no sane person would have predicted the Mets would be in the postseason, nor would they have 1 week later after they got annihilated in that 3-game series at home by the mighty Arizona Diamondbacks, and certainly not on the 19th of August when they fell 2 games below 500. Did any sane person, if they're being honest with themselves, thought the Mets would make it to the postseason? But I always said, and of course I didn't think so either, although a lot of people will question my sanity, I said at the time, if they got Cespedes back, they would at least have a puncher's chance of making it to the postseason. And that, along with the favorable September schedule, in spite of having the Atlanta Braves on it for several games, having that favorable schedule in September gave them a chance, and they took advantage of it and playing postseason baseball for the second consecutive year. Only the second time in their history they've accomplished.
And it is pretty incredible that for the second time that they are in the postseason, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But before we get into that, all of that, let's play a little voicemail that's going to set us up a little bit, and it's from another good friend, another old friend of the show, our good buddy Sean from the UK.
Hi Gary, it's Sean in Bristol, UK. Gary, thanks for the shout out last week. Really appreciate that. Anyway, I'm just serving up a big slice of humble pie. I'm going to have a little bit of a cream on that, and the reason I'm having the slice of humble pie is our good friend JB. Mr. Bruce is now starting to hit. couldn't have happened at a better time. I've saved a portion for you, Gary, if you like, because I think we've both been a little bit differential about him. But our man is he's got his back going. I've got to mention Jose Reyes. All right, start of the season he came over. You know, wasn't particularly good what he did back in early on in the year, but he has really come into this team and is producing RBIs, home runs when it needs it. So I think he's been an absolute key player in this last month or so to keep the Mets in with a shout of the wild card. Gary, by my maths, could clinch Saturday if they win Friday and Saturday. I think that could be possible. I'm not sure, but anyway, Gary, thanks again for all you do with a fantastic show, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care now. Bye.
I forgot to mention that Sean did call in before the Saturday game, in which the Mets clinched. So Jay Bruce is hitting, and I guess I'll have a little bit of pie with Sean. But what do you think about what Sean had to say there, Barry?
Well, Gary, first I want to congratulate Sean on that marvelous award that he received. And hopefully next year, either he'll make a trip to the United States again, or maybe we can even go across the pond and catch up with him there. More on that later. As far as Jay Bruce, well, I have to kind of go along with you, although maybe not quite as vociferous as you were about it. But I was against the trade. I hated to give up such a highly touted prospect as Dilson Herrera. And also, it doesn't mean by any means that I want the Mets to re-sign him, but he came through when they needed him the most. He went 11 for 23 with 4 home runs the final week. And as far as Jose Reyes, I have a little on him, but Sean kind of took the words out of my mouth. He certainly was a catalyst. The Mets had no team speed until he got there, and he's playing like the Jose Reyes of 2006. He seemingly made a easy transition defensively at third base. If somebody watching baseball for the first time saw him in the field, they would never know that he just became a third baseman the second half of this year, and him at the top of the lineup, followed by Asdrubal Cabrera, who also came back right around the same time as Cespedes did for that Giants series to form that tremendous 1-2 punch, kind of reminiscent of the Len Dykstra, Wally Backman 1986 Mets. That gives the Mets a very formidable lineup at the top of the order, and then you put in Cespedes in the 3-hole, and the resurgence of Curtis Granderson, and all of a sudden the Mets are hitting with runners in scoring position. They still are 2 home run reliant, but you know what? It's 2016, Gary. That's pretty much the norm in baseball. So again, here we are. The Mets are a formidable postseason threat. The Giants are going to be a very tough out because of Bumgarner, and like you, because of the way we feel about the St. Louis Cardinals, we wanted them out of the postseason. We got our wish, but now the Mets are going to have to deal with the greatest clutch pitcher, the greatest money pitcher of his generation tomorrow night in Madison, Bumgarner.
Well, yeah, that's going to be a tough task, but let's also give some kudos to these 2 young pitchers that came up, Seth Lugo and Robert Gsellman, 2 Cyclones, former Cyclones, I might add. And the job that they did, they came and really bailed out this pitching staff with Matz down and DeGrom down and Harvey down, and it just a wonderful job that they came and did, and nobody saw it coming, really.
2 months ago, if you had told me who Robert Gsellman was, I couldn't have answered you in 100 years. And again, I'm going to go to another favorite of yours and give kudos to Sandy Alderson, because the depth in the Mets organization really came to the surface with the ability to bring up guys like Gazelman and Lugo and T.J. Rivera, and the moment is definitely not too big for them. They've been playing like 10-year veterans, and it's just been a tremendous thing to watch, to see all these Mets players go down. It seemed like every day they would lose another guy to the disabled list, but they kept going on, and for that you have to credit not only Sandy Alderson, but also to Terry Collins, although some of the in-game decisions he makes really do make you scratch your head, including that clinching game when he took out James Loney in the top of the ninth for a pinch runner, leaving the Mets without their best defensive first baseman to handle the bottom of the ninth. But be that as it may, the Mets play hard for him. They love him. You could see the love they had for Collins during the post-game celebration. And somehow, although it doesn't seem like Collins and Alderson are always on the same page, and sometimes I'm not even sure if they're reading the same book, it works.
Yeah, that it's very true. I still think, though, they need something in this organization to the direction, or the philosophy, I should say, is something that concerns me, especially offensively. It seems to be all geared towards the home run ball, and I think that's not necessarily a good thing, especially looking in from the Brooklyn Cyclones point of view, because that is a ballpark that is very difficult to hit home runs in. So they should be looking towards more of gap hitters that have the potential to hit for power. But nonetheless, something that I've been thinking about the last few days, and I'd like to get your opinion on it, is that it seems to me that this current crop of AAA guys that they brought up are more, and it could be because they're higher draft picks and he finally got to this point, but they are more ready for the majors, or more major league type players than the guys we've seen in the last few years. And that's not a knock on the guys that we've seen the last few years. And I'm talking about the Josh Satin, the Eric Campbell, the Danny Munoz, the Johnny Manziel. These guys just seem to have more talent. And I mean Nemo, T.J. Rivera, who you mentioned. What's your opinion on that?
Oh, I agree with you. Yeah, the Mets, again, it goes back to the depth they have been able to accumulate in their organization. There's just more talent coming into at the major league level. They're ready to play when they get here. Ty Kelly is another one you could throw into the mix. Mm-hmm. Nice little utility player. Seemed to be ready. The moment was not too big for him. The players you mentioned previously really are 4A players, but it's just part of the process of the Mets getting higher draft picks, getting them because they finished in the bottom part of the standings and drafting well. And part of that, a lot of that, goes to Sandy Alderson. I noticed you mentioned one quarterback in when you mentioned Johnny Manziel.
Yeah.
Now, there's another former Heisman Trophy winning quarterback who I guess we'll have to allude to later on in the show, and his name is Tim Tebow. And I believe we got interrupted earlier. I heard my phone ring, and I'm a little afraid that I didn't answer it because it might have been God trying to contact me. But anyway, back to what you said about the Mets farm system. I absolutely agree with you. You could also add a Michael Fulmer to the list, who the Mets were able to use to acquire Yoenis Cespedes, which, of course, is the one move that trumps all the moves that the Mets have made. And because without Cespedes, the Mets are really nowhere. And he makes the rest of that lineup look a lot better, including Jay Bruce and all the others.
And I still don't like the Jay Bruce trade, though. All right, so
But that's another topic for another day, whether or not to re-sign and whether to use that $13 million buyout to possibly tack it on to try to sign Cespedes, which I would, and I know you agree with me, would prefer doing. Again, maybe if Bruce was, because the Mets are so left-hand dominant, which also makes the matchup against Bumgarner less favorable. Maybe if he was a righty hitter and had come from a bigger market, I'd feel better about that trade. But I agree with you on Bruce. But he came through when the Mets needed him the most, and for that we are very happy.
Yes, we are. You mentioned Bumgarner tomorrow night. Don't know whether they've announced any lineups. I do hear that in a bit of a surprise, the first baseman will be Loney. And I was a little surprised at that. I thought they may go with Duda, but and again they could still change it to go to Loney or Duda, but that's what I'm hearing now. It's Loney will be at first, and that's the only thing I heard. Kelly Johnson has good numbers against Bumgarner, but he's another lefty. I'm just wondering if they'll start him at second or go with T.J. Rivera.
Gary, I think they'll go with Rivera because I think they would want Johnson's bat off the bench. Another move that really had me scratching my head was in that last Atlanta game when they got swept was when Collins went ahead, and I know you alluded to on episode 260 with all the lefty-righty pinch-hitting matchups, which basically took the bat out of Kelly Johnson's hands, along with that ridiculous pulling of Addison Reed with one out in the eighth inning to get a lefty-lefty matchup. As far as the lineup tomorrow night, I've heard it both ways, and I don't really think you can go wrong. It's still going to be a tough matchup because you're going to have a lefty trying to hit Madison Bumgarner. I had actually heard that he was going to start Duda, but maybe something changed later on. I would think maybe he would want later in the game to have two powerful potential home run threats to come in off the bench, and those two bats being Lucas Duda and Kelly Johnson. But you could also argue the other way that if it's a tight game in the late innings, you would want to have Loney's defense in the game.
Yeah, either way, it's not an easy thing now to make up these rosters for essentially one game. That's what they have to do for this one game, and then they can reset for the other ones. And of course, the tough part's going to be the bullpen as well, because you don't want to leave off somebody like, for instance, a Bartolo Colon. Do you keep him on this roster now, or do you keep him off and add a pure relief pitcher? I think Giselman, I think, will probably be on it for the long relief. And I got a feeling that Colon will be on it because he can come in from the bullpen as he did last year. But, you don't want to slight anybody either that really played a major part.
Yeah, you probably don't need both Lugo and Giselman for tomorrow's game because, let's face it, Gary, if they have to go to one of them or Colon in the second and third inning against Madison Bumgarner, they're in a world of trouble.
Yeah, that's for sure. But you know what? It is a one game. It's a crapshoot, and it still doesn't tarnish what they've done this year. I mean, as we said, I wrote them off in August. I thought as of August 19th, they were 5.5 games out of the last wild card spot. I thought they were dead. Did not see this run occurring, and to really make up that ground, as really. San Francisco had the worst record since the All-Star break in baseball, I believe, and St. Louis to slip backwards into just a remarkable story, and that they were able to slip in. It's kind of gravy in a way what happens in this game.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, for them to get to a postseason game, albeit a one-game wild card playing game, definitely is gravy. I was shocked that the Giants played so poorly in the second half with their three-time World Series Hall of Fame caliber manager, the guy with the big head.
Well, I guess even guys with big heads can make mistakes from time to time.
I guess they can. and the way they slumped, the strength of the Giants has for years has been that bullpen. You know, all those lefties coming out of it, and the closer would change, but whoever it was, whether it was the Brian Wilson or Castillo, and now I guess they've gone back to Sergio Romo. But the bullpen has always been the strength of that team. But this year, I guess until recently, the last week or so, when they went back to Romo and he's kind of locked up the ninth inning, the Giants' bullpen has been terrible.
Yeah, and they've had some injuries as well as the Mets, and but you know they still got Bumgarner, and it should be a great pitcher matchup though. Bumgarner and Syndergaard. Just hope Syndergaard is on. That's the only thing.
And one thing you mentioned about not thinking that they would make it at, you know, when they were 2 games under 500 or the beginning of August. Again, no sane person would have thought that the Mets' postseason chances were very good. But one thing I keep seeing or reading or hearing, and I just want to mention this, there's a difference between giving up and not thinking your team is going to win or advance to the playoffs. I don't think any Mets fan, certainly not the players or the management, ever gave up on the season. You still play the season out. The team across town, the Yankees, sold off a lot of their star players, so they basically gave up on the season, and yet they still almost made the postseason. They only missed it by a couple of games. So none of us really gave up on the season. But once again, when the Mets was 60 and 62, what reason would anybody think that they were going to advance to the wild card game?
And yeah, and at the point you had Harvey was out for the season. Wheeler didn't look like he was going to come back. Matz was in and out. I mean, you had to fit. You know, Duda was still out. We didn't expect Duda to come back. Wright was out. You just lost a lot of key players, and you figured, well, maybe it's just not their year. And now they put together a run, found some other players. They may have found a second baseman. Maybe they don't have
That's
to
right,
go.
and the reason he's in there is because of the injury to Neil Walker, who was pretty much carrying the Mets offense the second half of the year until he went down for the season with his injury.
Right. And now maybe you don't have to spend the money on him. I'm kind of torn. I don't know what to do. He was a good player. Really had a terrific year until the injury, but do we want to bring him back and spend the money, or take that money, put it towards Cespedes, or put it towards something else? They have a lot of questions they have to answer. One rumor is they could give opt in on Bruce and then try to move him for either another bullpen arm or something else that they need. That's a possibility, and save the money there. But I think they have to get, or he could be insurance in case they don't get Cespedes back.
Whatever it takes, and unless a team just blows Cespedes out of the water, priority number one for the Mets is to sign Cespedes. He loves it here. He's a clutch player. He's charismatic. He's the guy. We saw this year with all the starting pitchers that went down that really the strength of the Mets is their overall depth in the organization. But without Cespedes, I mean, this team is battling the Phillies and the Braves for last place. So as far as second base, we'll have to see. And another name in the equation, and I feel really bad for him because he's one of my favorite players, and he got injured on a freak play, is Wilmer Flores. So he's certainly in the mix to second base too.
Right, and but that's all next year, and somebody else that could be in the mix for next year is in the Arizona Fall League now, and that's Tim Tebow. What do we think about all of this?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, and I'm surprised that you didn't lead off with Tebow, though you did mention him at the beginning of the show. I didn't realize that he was signed up to play in the Arizona League. That must be fairly recent news.
Yes, it. I think it just came out today. He was going to play in the instructional league, and now he's going to play in the fall league. And I think that just happened today.
Okay, because the only reason that I could think of this being a good move is because he and Cespedes have the same agent, and whatever it takes to keep Cespedes around is worth it. Otherwise, I thought until the news about, and still my think is, about the Arizona Fall League, that this is pretty much a publicity stunt or a money grab. He's still keeping his SEC obligations. If he was really serious about it, why would he do that? Although maybe I could change my thinking a little bit if he is committed to playing in the Arizona Instructional Fall League. Now, when does that start, Gary? Is that still during the college football season? It must be.
Yeah, I think it's I think it starts in a couple of weeks or next week or something. I know the Instructional League just ended the other day. I'm not sure when the Fall League actually starts, but I would imagine it's either within a few days or a week or so.
If he gave up his SEC gig, I would have a more positive feeling about it. It's just hard for me to embrace Tim Tebow. And if that offends anybody on earth or up above, I apologize.
Well, I think it'll be. I don't think he's going to give that up right now, and I think he's worked that out with the Mets. I would be interested to see next season whether he does, because if he does play minor league ball next year, and if he's not playing in a short season league, then he'll be playing a full schedule from April to October or September, really. Then it'll be interesting to see whether they keep that deal they have with him or whether or not he will leave at that time. But I can see this year, because it was kind of it is the instructional league and now it's the fall league, and they're probably, worked it out where he can leave for a day or two and it gives him a chance to play somebody else. So they usually rotate a lot of these guys to get looks at these guys, and I could see him keeping it this year, but next year I think would really be the key to see how whether or not he stays, and that'll show you what his level of commitment is.
Okay, well, we'll see how that plays out. Now, when you said Arizona, I thought you were going to go in another direction, so I'm going to bring this up because also this is fairly recent news, but there were several managerial firings this week, including Chip Hale, who, if you remember, was the Mets' third base coach prior to Tim Tuffle. There may have been somebody else in there in between. And wouldn't you love to get Chip Hale back into the Mets organization in some capacity, even as the possible successor to Terry Collins?
I could see him coming back as a third base coach, perhaps. Tuffle leaves a lot to be desired, but it's tough to get rid of a 86 World Series hero without, especially with the team making the playoffs. So it's hard to justify that at this stage. So I think the coaching staff gets another year completely in its completeness, unless somebody gets offered a manager's job, and there are some out there, but it doesn't seem like Tuffle wants to manage. It just doesn't seem like he's chasing after that.
Well, there's an opening in Vegas.
There's an opening in Vegas. I think he's been there and done that, though. You mean for Chip Hale or for Tuffle?
No, for Tuffle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's an
Oh
open.
no. We want Chip Hale. We want Chip Hale on the staff, whether he's the third base coach, the bench coach, but in some very significant capacity. I'm sure you remember he was a finalist for the Mets job that ultimately went to Collins.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think he did that bad of a job out in Arizona. I don't know all of the ins and outs. I don't know, wasn't in a clubhouse, but last year he was being considered for manager of the year, and now this year he's out of a job. So, but Dave Stewart went as well. Always thought Chip Hale was a pretty good baseball guy. So, I I don't know. They just they got him some players, and it didn't pan out. They talk about trades being bad. I mean, Danby Swanson for Shelby Miller, that turned out to be a real disaster for the D-backs.
Oh, my God. Yeah, that's on a par with the Lou Brock, Ernie Broglio trade, which probably a lot of the listeners wouldn't quite go back that far. Maybe you want to even take the baseball history. How about the Red Sox selling Babe Ruth to the Yankees?
There you go.
That Shelby Miller trade is one for the ages. And unless he comes back and has a Cy Young caliber year, that's going to go down as one of the worst trades in baseball history.
Now, the only thing is he is young enough where he could come back and salvage that trade, but
True.
right now it looks like a disaster, and Danby Swanson has actually made the majors and playing pretty well.
Sure, he sure did. He had some good games against the Mets. That's for sure. He looks like a future superstar for the Braves. They're putting a nice team together, Gary.
They certainly are, slowly but surely, and they really made a lot of big strides in the second half of the year, and I was a little bit surprised today to read that they are going to look. They have an interim manager, and they are actually going to interview other people to manage that club, and I thought he did a really good job.
I did too, Gary. I'm surprised at that also.
Why do you want to mix with something if the players are happy with the guy that's in there? Why mess around with that and bring in somebody else? I don't understand that move, but they could want a bigger name moving into a new ballpark and all. So we'll have to see how that all pans out as we go through the winter. Colorado was without a manager. Is Walt Weiss retired or stepped aside, or was he, given the old hee-ho and said, you better just retire? And the same in Chicago with Robin Ventura. So there's some opportunities out there for people. It'll be interesting to see who gets Chicago already hired their manager.
Right, Renteria.
Renteria, the former Cubs manager, is now with the White Sox, so that job is gone. But there's still Colorado and now Arizona, as well as who am I missing? Who did I just say? Atlanta.
I think those are, at least for now, the only openings, but there'll probably be one or two more to come over the next few days and weeks.
All right, we've got a wild card game tonight, Baltimore at Toronto. Any feelings about this game at all?
Nah, not really, but I'll just to pick a winner, I'll pick Toronto. I just think it would be delicious to have a Toronto-Texas Rangers division series with all the history, with all the beanball wars, all the fights they had. I think that would be great for baseball to see those two teams go at it again. So I'm rooting for Toronto, and I also, because R.A. Dickey is on the Blue Jays, I want the Blue Jays to win.
I did not even think of that, Toronto and Texas. I was really going to go for Baltimore, but now that you mention it, that would be a fascinating matchup. How about the other series? Boston and Cleveland. Boston looks like they can hit. I think they're going to be very dangerous. What's your feelings on that?
Okay, I'm going to go with the Red Sox. At the beginning of the season, picked the Indians to be the Mets' opponent in the World Series, but I'm going to backtrack on both of them, and I know we'll go over the prediction of the Mets series in a few moments. But the Indians are pretty decimated in their starting rotation. The Red Sox, along with the Cubs, probably have the best lineup in baseball. I'm going to go with Boston. What say you?
I have to agree, and along the same lines, a couple of weeks ago, I would have picked the Indians with that pitching staff, but they've been just decimated, as you said already, and you have to go with Boston. They can hit like the Dickens, and I think their pitching's a little bit better than everybody thinks. So I'm going to go with Boston and Texas against the wild card winner. As you said, you'd like to see Texas and Toronto. I'm going to go with Texas after when it's all said and done. I think that they just are they can hit, they can run, they can field, and they have some good pitching staff. They've got Darvish back, and he's been pitching well. And, of course, Cole Hamill is a horse there, and he's got all the experience in the world. And they got Lucroy. He made a big deal to get Jonathan Lucroy, and he's just been tearing it up for them. And I could just see them rolling right through.
Plus, they have my wife's favorite player, Carlos Beltran.
There you go. Forgot about him.
I looked this up a few moments ago, and I had no idea that Darvish had come back and was pitching lights out. But I looked at the numbers, and I was stunned. I really don't follow the American League. I certainly don't follow the Texas Rangers that closely. But that is quite a 1-2 punch. That's maybe not quite last year's Dodgers' Greinke Kershaw, and of course that had that work out. But that is a formidable 1-2 punch that the Rangers can throw, and they have a pretty good lineup too. I maybe because I also want to see a Toronto-Boston American League Championship Series, and they have a little bit of a history too. I guess Toronto has that with a lot of teams, as did the about to be dethroned world champion Kansas City Royals.
Yep.
Too. So I'm going to go for Toronto-Boston American League Championship Series.
I'm going with Texas-Boston, and I'm going to say I'm going to stick to my pick I made in the beginning of the season with the Astros going to the World Series, but I'm going to stick within the state. At least I can claim that I was statewide right and go with the Texas Rangers for the American League in the World Series.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so what about the NL?
Well, the NL, we've got Washington versus the Dodgers. I think Washington should dispatch the Dodgers, though you never know that Dave Roberts really did a great job out there.
Yeah, in fact, that's the direction I was going because of the four series, the potential championship series, this for me was the toughest one to pick. And the reason I'm going with the Dodgers is because I look at the managers in the dugouts and I remember how many times Dusty Baker has screwed up in a big spot. And I'm going to go with L.A. This is a tough call, but I'm going to go with the Dodgers. I think on paper the Nationals are the better team. Now, what's the status of Met killer, also known as Daniel Murphy? He's been out for a few games.
He did pinch hit, I believe, in the last game of the season to get some live pitching. So I would imagine that he would be back. Though how effective he's going to be playing the field and everything, who knows?
And also remember, Washington has a postseason history where they have a habit of losing leads late in games, and that bullpen, regardless of who the closer is, they got a good one now. Those guys falling apart, and if the game gets into the late innings, it's kind of hard to bet against the Dodgers closer Jansen.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know what Melanson's numbers are in postseason, But if I remember, he had a couple of bad games the last couple of years when he was with the Pirates in the postseason, I believe.
Yeah, I believe you're right.
So whether or not the stage is too big for him at that, who knows? I mean, he puts up good numbers in the regular season. I don't think he's proven yet in the postseason, and that's one key that may be very important in this.
The Dodgers winning the division, pretty much going away over the Giants, to me is the biggest surprise in baseball this season. I was shocked that the Dodgers were able to pull away, and they had as many injuries, if not more, than the Mets did.
Yes, they did, and but again, Dave Roberts kept it together, much like Terry Collins kept the Mets together, and did a fine job out there. So kudos to him, and of course, everybody and their brother is picking the Chicago Cubs. The Cubs are going to play the winner of the Mets and Giants. Who the Cubs going to be playing?
Gary, it is probably the best thing that anybody that is listening to this will want to hear. And I picked them with my heart, but my head had a different prediction. I can't go against it. I can't go against Bumgarner. I think he's just going to shut the Mets down. Maybe if the Mets lineup was a little more balanced, I'd have a better feeling about this. But I'm going to pick the Giants to win tomorrow night, which is probably, like I said, the best news for the Mets and their faithful. And then for the Cubs to finally do it, break their 108-year jinx and win the World Series. But I will say that the winner of the Cubs series, whether it's against the Mets or the Giants, that's the team I am picking to win the whole thing. The Mets, well, probably again with my heart. The Giants, because it's an even year. And the fact that they just know how to win when they get to the postseason. And then the Cubs, they are clearly have been the best team in baseball this season. And they've got to win it one of these years. So they're my pick to win it all. I have a Cubs-Red Sox World Series, which I'm sure Fox will fall over themselves and praise for. And I think that's what it's going to be. So I'm going to go Cubs over the Red Sox, and they will be the 2016 World Series champions. I hope I'm wrong, but that's my prediction.
Well, I guess I'm going to be.
Although one more, if the Mets don't win, for sentimental reasons, in spite of 1969 and Leo DeRocher and the Ron Santo heel clicks and the bleacher bums and all that nonsense, because of the 108-year drought, if the Mets aren't the champions, I want the Cubs to do it.
Well, I guess I'm going to be the homer in this. I'm going to pick the Mets tomorrow night. I think they're going to find a way. Or let's say I hope they find a way to beat them. And I have a strong feeling that the Cubs are going to be upset in this one. Whether it's the Mets or the Giants, I think the Cubs will be upset and will not get out of the division series. And it will be the Mets and the Texas Rangers in the World Series. And I'm going to say Texas brings home their first World Series championship.
Okay, Gary, so that would be a repeat of last year going into next year because, as you know, this year the Mets played Kansas City in that ridiculous 2-game series in each park, and next year they play the Rangers in the same 2-game series in each park. Further giving your argument about the thing you love the best, interleague play, a black eye, because those 2-game series in each other's park, as much as I'm for interleague play, that's absolutely ridiculous.
That's crazy, and don't go out and bet if you're going by my pick, because I also picked the Twins to win the AL Central this year. So, I don't think you want to spend your paycheck
or mine. and again, if there are Cubs fans listening, you say you think the Cubs will be upset. Well, if you're right, Cubs fans will really be upset, as in angry and pissed off as hell, because if they don't win it this year, when they've been clearly the best team in baseball from day one, then I mean, when? It all lines up perfectly for the Cubs. They have the pitching depth they didn't have last year. They picked up Chapman. I mean, they've got everything, and I don't know if I'm a Cubs fan, how nervous I would be, especially if they have to look across the field and see the Mets again, even though Daniel Murphy's not in the Mets dugout this year. So they may get him if they play the Nationals.
That's right. And I don't know. I think they'll lose a mystique if they win. Right now, they're the lovable loser Cubbies, and if they win it all, it kind of takes that 100 years away, and really kind of, I don't know. I understand they want to win, and but I don't know. I got a weird feeling that something will go wrong again, because it always seems to go wrong for them.
Well, that's true. But maybe the times are changing. Cleveland got a championship this year. After a zillion-year drought in every sport, they finally got a professional team winning a championship. But again, it's the postseason, Gary. As you know, anything can and usually does happen unexpectedly.
And I'm sure that the other team, whoever's going to face them in the playoffs, will be offering tickets to Steve Bartman to sit down in the left field corner right on the wall there and wave hello. Well, Moises Alou is no longer playing, but to say hello to whoever's playing left field now.
Last I heard, he's still on the disabled list for the last 8 years.
And he's the general manager, I think, of the Puerto Rican team, and he's on the disabled list. Or he was. I think he may have been for the World Baseball Classic. I'd have to look that up. But I know he was doing some sort of general manager work, and I believe it was for the Puerto Rican team. But as we say, we'll have to find that out. Two big retirements this week in the broadcasting world. One very highly touted, the other a little bit quiet. But two of the great voices in the history of sports broadcasting, never mind just baseball, of course. And I'm talking about Vin Scully and the great Dick Enberg calling it quits. Don't know how old Enberg is, but Scully's 88, and I think Enberg's up there, too. He's got to be in his 80s.
Right, early 80s, I believe. And, I'm not a big Vin Scully fan. It's almost un-American to say that, but I'm just not a Vin Scully fan. I think back to that 86 World Series, and maybe it had to do with the Red Sox still in their drought, like you had said earlier. But it sure sounded like while he was broadcasting that series, Scully was rooting for the Red Sox. And I just haven't gotten past that. I am no fan of Vin Scully. As far as Enberg, I think he is the best. And I feel bad that he got so shortchanged this week in retiring on the same weekend as Vin Scully did.
Well, I think part of the reason is to a lot of people, Enberg is known better as a football guy.
True.
And hasn't been with the Padres. He's done the last 2 years. He's done other teams in between. And we grew up with him sort of because in the 70s, when we were a little bit older, he was all over the place, especially even hosting TV shows, game shows.
Sports Challenge, of course.
Right.
There you go.
And I think that's how we really knew him, and from some of the football games. And but he got his recognition as far as went into the Hall of Fame last season. So that's a good thing. And I think really. Scully gets, and I'm not a big Vin Scully fan, but I have to say, from all reports, he's a very nice guy, And 67 years with one company is really an amazing feat. And I think that's why there's been more platitudes put towards Scully because of his length with one company. Plus, he did football as Enberg did. He did golf. He did everything, and I'm sure Enberg did. He did college basketball. Enberg, I believe, the NCAAs for years, and he was all over. But I think there was just a more familiarity with Scully, and I think that the 67 years had a large part to play with that.
Okay. Okay.
And he's really the last of the. He's the connection. Enberg was a little different, a West Coast guy. He's really the connection back to the old time baseball announcers, back to the 40s and the 50s when the game just started. I mean, he's the only one really that connected since at that time and was still around. And the connection to a Russ Hodges and a Connie Desmond and a Red Barber and a Mel Allen and Ernie Harwell and all of those kind of guys. He's really the last of that breed. And it's amazing that he's still working at his age.
Well, I can agree with you about the 67 years in one job. That is a tremendous accomplishment. The other announcers, all legends and all in the Hall of Fame, I'm pretty sure. I actually liked all of them better than Vin Scully.
And that's fine because we always have our choices. I happen to think that the three that we have in New York are probably the best in the business right now. But then again, it's a 2 or a 3-man booth where Scully was doing it by himself for a number of years. So he did work with partners. So people should remember that. It wasn't that he worked all the time by himself. It's just been, I don't know how many years he's done it with
I think the last couple of years, or as I would say recently, he would be in the booth with all of his friends.
And I guess before we go, we weren't on. I wasn't on last week, so didn't have a chance to comment on the Jose Fernandez passing. Of course, did a show with my good friend Rich Baxter called the Baseball Talk Radio Show that we do once a week. That we discussed this because we had a show the day he passed. So just a sad occasion, a sad day for baseball that day, a tough 3 days right afterwards for the Miami Marlins as well as the Mets. And the Mets went in to play the Marlins and understandably lost that opening game. You kind of had a feeling that they didn't have a chance in that game, and when D. Gordon led off with a home run, that pretty much sealed it right there. But just a very difficult time for the game.
Very difficult game to watch, and very difficult to see a young man with such great talent gone so soon, and to die that way. I mean, what a tragedy. And yeah, Gary, the Mets had no chance that night. There was no way the Marlins were not going to win that game. But give it to the Mets. They bounced back, won the next two. I'm sure that could not have been easy for them to play that 3-game series either. And they handled it with class. At the end of that third game, you saw all the hugs and Collins going to the Marlins players and hugging them and shaking their hands, and it was very tough to watch, but it really put the Mets in a very good light to see them handle that situation with such class and with such dignity.
It certainly did, and again, it's got to be difficult for everyone involved, and even when Miami went to Washington after that series, they were. Again, treated. It was very. The Washington did a nice job in
And if
handling.
you remember, they were not mathematically eliminated just yet when they played that series.
Right.
Not that it mattered all that much to them, I'm sure, but still, those were important games, and the Mets really had to find a way to take that series, and they did, in spite of losing that first game, which, like you said, almost seemed predestined for the Marlins to win.
Right, and I think Terry Collins mentioned before the game that he had to, had to talk to the guys and say, "All right, that was then, but we have our minds here. We're very upset and everything, but we do have a job to do." And it can sound callous if it's not done correctly, and I think he did it correctly because I think he got his message out that we're all upset and we're all grieving, but we are working towards something here for us that we've been working for the whole year, and we have to get our focus back on that. And as you say, they got the job done, won the 2 games there, and took care of the business. And this is where we are today now.
No question about it. Very, very tough week for baseball and for sports as a whole, because, of course, later that night we heard about the passing of the legendary golfer Arnold Palmer.
Yes, another sad thing, different kind of sadness, though, because he was in his late 80s, so
Right.
Had a full life, and but still, as one golfer said, I believe it was my good buddy Curtis Strange who said that he thought that Arnold Palmer was never going to die, and I think we all kind of had that feeling.
Yeah, it's just a tough day. I mean, there are not too many athletes that basically just Arnold Palmer was to golf what Muhammad Ali was to boxing. I mean, coming along at just the right time in the TV era, and whoever is making all these millions playing golf now, and which is just about everybody on the pro tour now, owes their success and their financial windfall, at least in part, to Arnold Palmer. He was the king.
That's for sure. He came along at just the perfect time, and
just the right time.
Had the right amount of flair and Hollywood looks to really get it going on TV and get the advertising and the stuff that he advertised in his lifetime. You some of the stuff you wouldn't even believe, but
I know, and the way he marketed that into entrepreneurship, which made him a billionaire, probably many times over. He was the first athlete that was able to do that.
And then started another career as a pitchman for Quaker Oil and Hertz, with the infamous O.J. Simpson ads now. And really, a lot of young people didn't even realize he ever played golf. They just thought he was the guy that was with O.J. Simpson on the commercials there, and on the tractor with the Quaker Oil. And, of course, later went on to invent the Arnold Palmer iced tea, the Arnold Palmer drink that everybody drinks now worldwide.
True.
And just an amazing guy, and had some flying. He was a pilot, and he set some records for flight. I think around the world. Just an amazing guy. One of the first guys to fly to events because he wanted to fly. He learned how to fly. Went to spend more time with the family. Had a jet plane, I believe. He bought one of the first jets that Lear made, and unbelievable. Quite a character and quite a career, and sad to see him go.
Yep, certainly was. But like you said, he was in his late 80s, and he had as full a life as anyone could possibly have. But a tough week in sports to lose an iconic athlete like that, and of course to lose Jose Fernandez, not even 25 years old yet. How terrible!
Just a shame. Just a shame. Well, Barry, this has been fun, and we get to watch some baseball now, and it's part of the debate if you're into that sort of thing. And there's even a hockey game on, I think. So lots of stuff to do, but got to catch some of that wild card game. And, of course, tomorrow night, the big wild card game for the New York Mets. And let's hope for the best.
Syndergaard against Bumgarner. Hopefully, as usual, my predictions will be wrong. So I'm going to leave it with you, Gary, to sign off with your normal saying, and to also say it was great co-hosting this show with you once again, and I thank you for the opportunity.
And you're most welcome. And as Barry said, Bumgarner, Syndergaard, let's keep our fingers crossed for tomorrow night, and remember to keep the faith, stay optimistic, and let's go Mets. And we'll see you all again next time.